Welcome to Bedtime Astronomy. Explore the wonders of the cosmos with our soothing Bedtime Astronomy podcast. Each episode offers a gentle journey through the stars, planets, and beyond, perfect for unwinding after a long day. Let's travel through the mysteries of the universe as you drift off into a peaceful slumber under the night sky.
I want you to do something tonight, just, for a minute or two.
Highly recommend it, yeah.
Right. Step outside, look up at the night sky, and just find the moon. I mean, really look at it.
Take a good long look.
Because for our entire lives, and honestly, for all of human history, before this exact moment, that silver disc up there has just been, well, a symbol.
It's been poetry, basically.
Exactly. A destination for dreamers, a subject for artists, and, for a very brief shining moment, a few decades ago, it was a place we actually visited.
A very quick camping trip.
Yeah, camping trip. We went, we took some photos, we left some footprints, collected some rocks, and we came back.
And that was it for 50 years.
But looking up at it right now, today, in May of 2026, everything has fundamentally changed. The moon is no longer just a celestial body floating out there.
Far from it.
It is an active, heavily funded, rapidly developing construction site. I mean, humanity is officially packing its bags, and we are not just visiting this time. We are moving in.
We really are, and it is a profound psychological shift, The difference between a camping trip and building a permanent homestead alters literally every single engineering and logistical parameter you can think of.
It changes the whole game.
Completely. When you look at the sheer scale of what is unfolding right now, the blueprints aren't just theoretical anymore. They are funded. They're contracted.
The checks have cleared.
Exactly. And the hardware is actively being built, tested, and in some cases, it's literally already sitting on the launch pad. We are watching the transition from exploration to sustained occupation in real time.
And that's exactly what we're going to map out today. We're going to walk through this newly operational three-phase lunar base plan, which is frankly just mind-blowing in its scope.
It really is staggering.
We'll examine the commercial fleet that's actually making this possible, the specific, architectural differences between the landers, the buggies, and the drones that have to somehow all work together.
That integration is a massive puzzle.
Huge puzzle. And then we're going to break down the sheer brutal physics of building a localized power grid in a vacuum.
Oh, the dust. We have to talk about the dust.
We'll definitely get into the razor dust.
Yeah.
And finally, we are going to unpack the incredibly thorny international space law involved here.
The geopolitical side.
Right, the profound geopolitical implications of establishing actual off-world territory. Because you don't just build a base that massive without drawing a line in the lunar dust.
And how you draw that line changes absolutely everything down here on Earth, too.
Exactly.
Those lines are going to define the next century of human progress, really, both scientifically and politically. The decisions being made right now, like this month, are setting the precedent for how humanity will operate beyond Earth orbit forever.
No pressure. Right.
Right. There is no historical playbook for this. None.
To put this in perspective for you, think about the early days of aviation. You had the Wright brothers, you had those barnstormers doing these incredible death-defying stunts in biplanes.
Landing in cow pastures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was spectacular, but it was fleeting. That was the Apollo era. Incredible feats of human bravery and engineering, but essentially they were magnificent stunts designed to prove a point.
To win a race.
Yeah, to beat the Soviets. But what we are looking at now, right now in 2026, is the equivalent of someone walking onto an empty field and saying, we are building an international airport right here.
Pour the concrete.
Pave the runways, build a terminal, set up the air traffic control. It's the shift from proving we can fly to building the actual infrastructure so we can stay.
And the part that is just...
The timeline. The part that still breaks my brain is the timeline. The velocity of this entire operation is staggering.
It really is. I mean, we can't even begin to analyze the actual hardware they're building on the moon until we understand the immense time pressure under which it's being developed.
It's moving so fast.
So fast. The operational strategy is entirely dictated by this highly aggressive cadence.
Let's ground this in where we are right this second. Last month, April 2026, the Artemis II mission blew everyone away.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
We had 4 astronauts fly around the moon, and they traveled deeper into space than any of the Apollo crews did back in the late 60s and early 70s.
Setting new distance records.
Yeah. And there was that incredible moment on April 6th, the lunar eclipse of the sun captured right from lunar orbit. It just felt so historic.
A genuinely iconic image.
But the wild part is, the space agencies aren't even pausing to take a breath. They're already looking at Artemis III, which is targeted for mid-2027.
Just next year.
Right. And for that mission, they're going to be practicing docking the Orion capsule in Earth orbit with the commercial lunar landers. All of this is setting the stage for 2 astronauts to actually touch down on the lunar surface as early as 2028.
Which is just around the corner. To go from a deep space fly around, right, to orbital docking rehearsals, to a crewed surface landing in essentially a 2 to 3 year window, it's unprecedented.
It really is.
But that docking practice you mentioned for mid-2027, that is the critical linchpin of the entire endeavor.
See, okay, let's unpack this, because I have to challenge this timeline a bit. To a lot of people, practicing docking in Earth orbit almost sounds like a step backward.
How so?
Well, we just flew hundreds of thousands of miles deeper into space than Apollo just a month ago. Now we're talking about hanging out in low Earth orbit next year just to practice connecting 2 ships together.
Right, I see what you mean.
And then a crewed surface landing the year after.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to dock in Earth orbit right before you go to the moon feels like, I don't know, practicing putting your seatbelt on while you're already backing out of the driveway.
That's a great visual.
Is this timeline wildly optimistic, or does having an entirely new operational model change the math?
Oh, it changes the math completely. You have to remember how the Apollo architecture worked. It was a single, monolithic, government-driven design.
The giant Saturn V.
The Saturn V launched everything at once. The command module, the service module, the lunar lander, they were all stacked on top of each other.
Like a giant layered cake.
Exactly. Built by the same core network of contractors under a single guiding agency. Everything was custom built for one specific linear sequence of events.
So they just undocked and redocked with themselves.
Right. But Artemis is entirely modular. You have an Orion capsule built by Lockheed Martin launching on a Space Launch System rocket, but it has to rendezvous and physically dock with a lunar lander built by entirely different commercial entities.
Like SpaceX or Blue Origin.
Yes. And those landers launched on their own separate rockets days or weeks prior.
So it's not just one train leaving the station anymore. It's multiple vehicles leaving from different places built by different companies that have to meet up mid-journey.
Precisely. And that modularity requires intense orchestration. Practicing that docking in Earth orbit isn't a step backward at all. It is an absolute physical necessity.
Because the risk is so high.
Think of it this way. Orbital docking is like trying to thread a needle while both you and the needle are riding a roller coaster traveling at 17,500 miles per hour.
That is terrifying.
And that's in Earth orbit. When you are 240,000 miles away from Earth, in the vacuum of deep space, in a totally different gravity well, connecting 2 massive, complex vehicles requires absolute perfection.
You can't just pull over if you miss.
No. You have latency in communications, and more importantly, if something goes wrong during docking in deep space, your abort options are severely limited.
Oh, I get it. Because if you're in low Earth orbit, you're only a few hours from splashing down in the ocean if you have to bail out.
Exactly. Earth orbit provides a relatively safe, highly monitored parking lot to ensure these distinct pieces of hardware with their totally distinct software ecosystems can physically integrate.
Like a shakedown cruise.
They are testing the avionics, the reaction control thrusters, the physical docking latches, and the life support umbilicals. They have to prove that the modular architecture works before they take it to the highway of translunar space.
Which perfectly illustrates why the old way of doing logistics is completely out the window.
The old way being?
Where the astronauts basically bring everything they need in their own backpacks. This modular approach means you don't have to carry your house on your back. You can send the house ahead of time.
Which is a massive paradigm shift.
We are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars in contracts, just awarded to major U.S. companies to build what is effectively a commercial moving fleet. NASA is acting less like a manufacturer and more like a general contractor, hiring out specialized firms.
It is a profound shift in procurement, and it's what enables the mass and scale required for a permanent base. Historically, human spaceflight involved the crew arriving with their equipment.
Right.
But the sheer tonnage required for sustained occupation makes that impossible to launch on a single rocket.
So let's break down this fleet because the architecture is fascinating. You have Blue Origin, tasked with providing a pair of cargo landers.
Big ones, too.
Huge. Yeah. And these landers aren't for the crew, at least not initially. Their job is precision delivery of heavy surface infrastructure. Specifically, they were delivering the moon buggies, formerly called lunar terrain vehicles, which are being built by Astrolab and Lunar Outpost.
The surface rovers, yeah.
Then you have SpaceX utilizing their massive Starship architecture, developing the landers for the actual human crews.
Which is a skyscraper of a ship.
Literally a skyscraper. And on top of all that, you have Firefly Aerospace delivering the first autonomous drones to the moon. Firefly already proved they could do this when they successfully landed their Blue Ghost lander on the moon last year in 2025.
A huge milestone for them.
And all of this hardware is being aimed at the lunar South Pole. And crucially, all these machines are scheduled to arrive before the first Artemis astronauts even get there in 2028.
Sending the moving trucks first solves the most critical bottleneck of surface operations, which is astronaut time.
Because they're on the clock the second they land.
Exactly. When a human being is in a pressurized suit on the lunar surface, every single second is a multi-million-dollar resource.
You don't want them doing chores.
You do not want them spending their highly dangerous, precious initial days on the surface unpacking crates, assembling solar panels, or deploying basic transport.
It makes total sense.
By relying on autonomous and remotely operated commercial hardware, the crew arrives to a site that is already prepped. The buggies are charged, the science payloads are deployed, the communication relays are active.
I keep thinking of this like having a service deliver your furniture, assemble all the IKEA beds, and set up your Wi-Fi router before you even get the keys to the new house.
It's a luxury but a necessary one up there.
But looking at the hardware, the integration problem seems terrifying. I mean, Blue Origin is building the cargo landers, Astrolab is building the buggies, SpaceX is building the crew modules, Firefly is building the drones.
Lots of different cooks in the kitchen.
How do all these different commercial pieces seamlessly integrate in a lethal vacuum? Honestly, if I buy a smart light bulb, half the time it won't connect to my phone.
Right. And your living room isn't trying to kill you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What if the Firefly delivery drone uses a completely different telemetry standard than the Astrolab buggy?
That is the multi-billion-dollar engineering puzzle that keeps systems integrators awake at night. You are dealing with disparate corporate cultures, proprietary software stacks, and different engineering philosophies.
So how do they manage it?
However, this modular commercial approach is also the only way to foster rapid innovation. By relying on a diverse ecosystem, you eliminate the single points of failure that plagued government-only programs.
Oh, like if one thing breaks, the whole mission isn't scrapped.
Exactly. If a specific component of the Astrolab buggy is delayed, it doesn't ground the SpaceX crew lander or the Firefly drone. They operate on standardized interfaces agreed upon mechanical and digital handshakes.
And we are seeing the physical evidence that this commercial sector is spooling up to handle the mass requirements. Just look at the hardware tests happening right now.
The pace of testing is relentless.
On May 23rd, just days ago, SpaceX launched its biggest, most beefed-up Starship yet on a flight test. The payload capacity of that vehicle alone fundamentally changes what we can put on the surface.
It really does.
We aren't talking about tiny, delicate little probes anymore. We're talking about hundreds of metric tons of steel, batteries, and life support systems.
The mass-to-orbit capability of something like Starship, paired with the precision landing capabilities of the Blue Origin platforms, gives mission planners a toolkit they have just never had before.
It's a whole new ballgame.
But launching the mass is only half the battle. Navigating it to the destination efficiently is just as critical, which ties into the routing advancements.
Right. I was actually looking at that new mathematical method calculated on May 15th for the most efficient Earth-Moon route yet.
The orbital mechanics side of things.
Yeah, and my initial thought was, don't we just point the rocket at where the moon is going to be and hit the gas? Why do we need new math for a route we've already flown?
Because orbital mechanics is not about flying in a straight line, it's about surfing gravity wells.
Surfing?
Yeah. When Apollo went to the moon, they used a direct high-energy trajectory. They burned a massive amount of fuel to get there in 3 days, and they burned a massive amount of fuel to break and enter lunar orbit.
So they were just powering through it.
Right. That requires an enormous fuel fraction, meaning most of the rocket's weight is just propellant, leaving very little room for actual cargo.
So high speed, low efficiency. Kind of like driving a sports car on the highway, but you're stuck in second gear.
That's a great analogy. What mission planners are using now and what these new mathematical models optimize are concepts like ballistic lunar transfers or utilizing the weak stability boundary.
Okay, what does that actually mean?
Instead of brute forcing their way against Earth's gravity, they launch the spacecraft much further out, sometimes millions of miles, allowing the subtle gravitational pull of the sun to alter the spacecraft's trajectory.
Wait, they go out past the moon to get to the moon?
Yes. The sun's gravity effectively tugs the spacecraft's orbit, reshaping it so that it perfectly intersects with the moon's orbit at the exact right velocity.
So instead of slamming on the brakes when you get to the moon, you just sort of glide perfectly into its lane at the exact same speed it's already traveling.
Precisely. It can take months instead of days, but the delta-V savings, the amount of fuel required to execute the maneuvers, is incredibly significant.
And less fuel means more cargo.
Exactly. And when you are a commercial company trying to deliver heavy infrastructure like a lunar buggy or a power station, fuel efficiency directly translates to payload capacity. You can carry more solar panels, more batteries, and more scientific gear if you don't have to carry as much propellant.
And all of that heavy infrastructure is heading to a very specific destination. They aren't going back to the equatorial regions like the Sea of Tranquility where Apollo 11 landed.
No, they're heading south.
Right. They're aiming exclusively for the lunar South Pole, which implies this isn't just about exploration anymore. This is a massive hunt for resources.
The lunar South Pole is, without hyperbole, the most valuable real estate in the inner solar system right now.
Wow.
It is defined by its extreme lighting conditions. Because the moon's axis is barely tilted relative to the sun, the sunlight hits the poles at a very shallow horizontal angle.
So it casts really long shadows.
Yes, it creates areas of permanent shadow at the bottom of deep impact craters regions that literally haven't seen sunlight in billions of years.
That's haunting to think about.
In those cold traps, temperatures drop to nearly absolute zero, and they harbor immense reserves of volatile resources, most notably water ice.
And right next to those freezing craters, you have the exact opposite extreme.
Correct. On the rims of those craters and on adjacent mountain peaks, you have areas of near-eternal sunlight.
Because they're elevated above the shadow.
Exactly. So within a few kilometers of each other, you have the two things necessary to sustain human presence: water ice for drinking, breathable oxygen, and rocket fuel, juxtaposed with permanent sunlight for continuous solar power.
It's like an oasis.
That unique geography makes the South Pole the only logical place to establish a permanent foothold.
Which brings us to the most mind-bending part of the timeline. What happens after the moving trucks arrive and the astronauts land in 2028?
The long-term plan.
Right, because 2028 is just the starting line. Once they are there, the narrative completely shifts from getting there to staying there. We move into phase 2 and phase 3 of the operational plan.
And this is where the sheer audacity of the engineering required really comes into focus.
Let's lay it out for everyone. Phase 2 kicks off in 2029 and runs into the early 2030s. The entire focus of this phase is building permanent infrastructure.
Heavy infrastructure.
And the centerpiece of that infrastructure, power grid, a literal physical power grid on the surface of the moon.
It sounds like sci-fi, but it's happening.
Then, as we move into phase 3, sometime in the 2030s, the plan shifts to constructing specialized permanent habitats to support astronauts for extended periods. There's this quote from Carlos Garcia Gullen, the executive of NASA's moon base program, that puts a pin in exactly what this means. He stated, "Then we'll be able to say, hey, we're permanently here and we're not giving it up."
The gravity of that statement is immense. We're permanently here and we're not giving it up. It is a definitive policy shift.
It's huge.
It marks the end of the exploratory era where we plant a flag and return, and the beginning of the settlement era.
See, I hear power grid and my brain just stalls out. We go from remotely driving Astrolab buggies around in 2028 to laying down a functional electrical grid in just a year or two.
It's a steep curve.
Setting aside the fact that we have a hard enough time keeping the power grid running during a bad winter storm here on Earth, how exactly do you build hard, physical electrical infrastructure in a place with zero atmosphere, zero wind or water for cooling, and a surface made of microscopic razor blades?
It's a hostile work environment, to say the least.
What are the actual physics of building a grid there?
A localized power grid is the ultimate dividing line between a temporary outpost and a permanent base. You simply cannot run long-term life support systems or heavy drills for ice extraction or fuel processing plants on temporary batteries or small lander-mounted solar panels.
You need real juice.
You need reliable, continuous, high kilowatt power. But the engineering environment is, as you said, actively hostile. Let's start with the dust, the lunar regolith.
Right, because it's not like sand at the beach. Sand on Earth has been tumbling around in oceans and blowing in the wind for millions of years. It's smooth.
Exactly. Lunar regolith is created by billions of years of micrometeorite impacts smashing into the surface. There is no atmospheric weathering to smooth the edges.
So it's just sharp.
It is essentially composed of microscopic, jagged, asymmetrical shards of glass and crushed rock. It is incredibly abrasive.
Like breathing in fiberglass.
Or worse, it will degrade silicon seals, jam mechanical gears, and scratch the protective coatings right off of solar panels. But the shape of the dust isn't even the worst part. It's the electrical charge.
I always forget about the charge. How does dust get a static charge in a vacuum?
It's driven by the environment itself. On the sunlit side of the moon, there is no atmosphere to block the sun's ultraviolet radiation. That intense UV light hits the silicate regolith and actually knocks electrons off the dust particles through the photoelectric effect.
Wow, just strips them right off.
Leaves the sunlit dust with a strong positive charge. Meanwhile, on the night side, the solar wind, which is a stream of charged particles from the sun, sweeps past the moon, and electrons from that plasma hit the dark side, giving the dust there a strong negative charge.
So the dust literally clings to everything magnetically.
Electrostatically, yes. Because it's charged, it sticks to spacesuits, it coats camera lenses, and crucially, it will coat the solar arrays and thermal radiators of a power grid.
That's a nightmare for maintenance.
It gets crazier. Near the Terminator line, the boundary between day and night, the difference in charge can be so strong that the dust actually levitates off the surface.
Wait, really? Levitating dust?
Yes. When you are trying to lay miles of power cables to connect a solar array situated on a sunlit peak down into a shadowed crater where the water ice operations are, you have to engineer the cable shielding and the mechanical connectors to survive being dragged through an abrasive, highly charged, levitating field of glass.
That is just wow. And what about the temperature swings? Because a power grid implies metal cables, transformers, physical connections.
Oh, the thermal dynamics are brutal.
I know heat causes metal to expand and cold causes it to contract. What kind of temperatures are these cables dealing with?
The thermal dynamics are arguably the hardest physical constraint. In direct sunlight at the lunar equator, temperatures can reach 250 degrees Fahrenheit.
Boiling.
Beyond boiling. In the permanent shadows of the polar craters, they plunge to minus 300 degrees Fahrenheit or even colder.
Oh my God.
If your power cable runs from a sunlit peak into a shadowed crater, the coefficient of thermal expansion means the sunlit portion of the cable is trying to aggressively expand, while the shadowed portion is violently contracting.
That sounds like the metal would literally just shear itself apart over time.
It absolutely causes extreme material fatigue. It requires alloys and composite materials that simply don't see typical use in Earth-based construction. Furthermore, without an atmosphere, there is no convective cooling.
What does that mean for the electronics?
Well, if a transformer or a power distribution node on Earth gets hot, the air around it absorbs the heat and carries it away.
The wind just cools it down.
Right. On the moon, in a vacuum, the only way to shed excess heat from electrical resistance is through thermal radiation, which requires large, heavy, highly specialized radiator panels. And those panels, of course, have to be kept clean of the charged, insulating lunar dust.
So to recap here, we need highly specialized, thermally resilient cables that won't snap when half of them are freezing and half are boiling, coated in shielding that won't get shredded by static glass dust, laid down by autonomous commercial buggies across miles of jagged craters.
Yeah, that sums it up.
And this is just phase 2.
It is a monumental undertaking, but it is the necessary prerequisite for phase 3. Once you have a stable, localized grid, you can begin constructing the specialized habitats designed for extended habitation.
And the phrase extended periods does a lot of heavy lifting in these plans. We aren't talking about Apollo astronauts spending 72 hours in a tin can, taking some rocks and leaving.
No, these are long-duration stays.
We are talking about crews living months at a time on the surface. That fundamentally shifts the engineering from simple survival to long-term sustainability. You mentioned radiation earlier. I imagine a thin aluminum hull isn't going to cut it if you're staying for 6 months.
It absolutely won't. Without a thick atmosphere or a strong global magnetic field like Earth has, the surface of the moon is bombarded by lethal radiation.
From the sun.
Partially. You have solar proton events, which are sudden, massive bursts of radiation from solar flares. But you also have galactic cosmic rays, which are incredibly high-energy particles from outside our solar system entirely.
It's just constantly pelting the surface.
Yes. If a crew is on the surface during a major solar flare without proper shielding, it is a fatal event.
So how do you shield a habitat if you can't launch, feet-thick walls of lead or water from Earth?
You use what is already there. The most viable architectural plans for Phase 3 involve utilizing the lunar regolith itself.
Sharp dust.
The very same. The cargo landers or autonomous rovers will likely use microwave sintering to melt the regolith into solid blocks, or use 3D printing techniques to construct thick, protective shells over the pressurized habitat modules.
Oh, so they bury themselves.
By burying the habitats under several meters of lunar soil, you provide excellent shielding against both radiation and micrometeorite impacts, while also insulating the habitat against those wild thermal swings we talked about.
It's essentially building a high-tech bunker. But even if you solve the physical shielding, what about the human element? A closed-loop life support system for months on end is completely different from a short mission.
The life support engineering is incredibly complex. The International Space Station has taught us a lot about water reclamation and oxygen generation, but the ISS is in low Earth orbit.
They get grocery delivery.
Right. It receives frequent resupply shipments. A lunar habitat must achieve a much higher degree of closed-loop autonomy. Every molecule of water, every breath of oxygen has to be scrubbed, recycled, and reused with near-perfect efficiency.
You sweat it out, you drink it later.
That's the reality of it. And the mental health protocols will be just as rigorous. Living in a confined subterranean space in a lethal environment with communication delays and no immediate rescue option requires a profound level of psychological resilience.
Which naturally leads us to a deeply fascinating and I think highly controversial aspect of this entire plan.
Yep.
Because if you have specialized buried habitats and you have a sprawling power grid connecting solar arrays to crater floors, you suddenly have a massive physical footprint.
You're taking up real estate.
You are occupying and actively modifying a large chunk of physical space. And that brings us to the moonfall perimeter and the incredible geopolitical friction this is creating right now.
This is where the extreme engineering challenges intersect with the ambiguities of international space law. It is arguably the most complex and delicate part of the entire endeavor.
Because there is no Supreme Court of Space.
Exactly. No police force, no zoning board.
Let me lay out what they're actually planning here, because when I first read it, it sounded like science fiction. Carlos Garcia Galan envisions this lunar base eventually sprawling over hundreds of square miles.
It's massive.
Hundreds of square miles. That is not a little research station. That is the footprint of a major metropolitan city. And to mark the perimeter of this massive operational area, they're planning to use those Firefly drones we talked about earlier.
The autonomous landers.
Yeah. These drones are dubbed Moonfall, and they will be stationed at the corners of this territory. Now, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman was very careful with his words when discussing this. He framed it with heavy diplomatic language.
Very intentional wording.
He said these territory markers are meant to be respectful of other countries' spacecraft and equipment that might be operating nearby. And then he added the critical phrase that the U.S. expects reciprocity in the matter.
That statement is a masterclass in diplomatic framing and legal maneuvering. To understand why it's so provocative, you really have to look at the foundational text of international space law, which is the 1967 Outer Space Treaty.
The big one.
Right. Article 2 of the treaty explicitly states that outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or occupation, or by any other means.
So nobody owns it.
No nation can legally claim that a piece of the moon belongs to them.
But wait. If you draw a perimeter of drones around 100 square miles of the most valuable, resource-rich real estate at the South Pole, and you tell everyone else, hey, please respect our equipment inside this giant box, haven't you just effectively claimed that box?
It sure looks that way.
I mean, it sounds exactly like putting up a digital white picket fence and enforcing lunar zoning laws.
Yeah.
How does expecting reciprocity not just quietly turn into an international land grab?
It is the exact tension that international space lawyers are debating right now. What Isaacman is outlining is a nuanced, very deliberate sidestep of the sovereignty limitation.
A loophole.
By using the language of respecting equipment, he is invoking Article 9 of that same Outer Space Treaty, which requires states to conduct activities with due regard to the corresponding interests of others and to avoid harmful interference.
Ah, So they are arguing that they need the massive perimeter not because they own the land, but because their equipment is so sensitive or dangerous that anyone coming close would cause harmful interference.
Precisely. And from an engineering standpoint, it is a highly legitimate argument.
It is.
We touched on the physics of the lunar environment earlier, but consider what happens when a heavy spacecraft lands or takes off in a vacuum. This is known as plume surface interaction.
Wow.
On Earth, when a rocket fires, the atmosphere slows down the exhaust and the dust billows into a cloud. In the vacuum of the moon, there is no air resistance. When a massive, multi-ton lander fires its descent engines, it accelerates the jagged, abrasive lunar regolith outward horizontally at velocities exceeding 3,000 meters per second.
That's basically the speed of a bullet.
It's faster than many bullets. And because the moon's gravity is only 1/6 of Earth's, that ejecta can travel for kilometers. Some of it can even achieve lunar orbit.
Just keeps going.
If a competing space agency or a commercial rival lands their spacecraft 2 kilometers away from your multi-billion-dollar solar array, the ejecta from their landing could completely shred your equipment.
Oh, I see. So the physics of landing on the moon literally mandate that you keep your distance.
Exactly. You physically require a massive safety zone to prevent destroying each other's infrastructure. You aren't claiming the land belongs to the United States in the way that, say, Texas does.
Right.
You are claiming that the operations within this perimeter require a vast safety buffer. But the geopolitical reality is that it achieves the exact same result.
It's a de facto territory.
It is a highly strategic way to monopolize the optimal landing sites, the sunlit power peaks, and the deepest ice craters, without technically violating the letter of the law regarding sovereignty.
It's like calling shotgun on the best seat in the car, but arguing you only need it because your legs are long, not because you own the car.
That's a perfect way to put it.
But if I'm playing devil's advocate here, from the perspective of the European Space Agency or the China National Space Administration, the physical result is a monopoly. If the U.S. establishes a 100-square-mile safety zone around the Shackleton crater, neutral law or not, they have locked down the most critical resources.
And that is exactly how competing powers view it. The moonfall drones serve a dual purpose. On the surface, they are scientific tools, communication relays, or navigation beacons. But practically, they are digital boundary markers.
They're border guards.
When Isaac Min demands reciprocity, he is setting a legal precedent. He's saying, we respect your small safety zone over there, so you are legally obligated under the treaty to respect our massive hundreds of square mile safety zone right here.
Checkmate.
It forces the international community to accept the U.S. operational footprint as a de facto exclusion zone.
It's breathtaking when you really think about the scale and the audacity of it. 100 square miles of lunar surface, ringed by autonomous drones, enforcing a legal loophole driven by the physics of rocket exhaust.
That's quite the sentence.
It forces us to step back from the granular details, the power cables, the regoliths, the drones, and ask the biggest question of all: why? What is the ultimate endgame driving this unprecedented expenditure of capital and engineering?
The endgame is multifaceted, but it ultimately points entirely away from the moon. The space agencies have laid out 3 primary goals for this architecture.
Let's walk through them. The stated goals are: 1, encouraging a lunar economy; 2, conducting deep scientific research; and 3, which is the foundational goal, preparing for a Mars expedition.
That third one is the real driver.
Right. Administrator Isaac Min put it incredibly bluntly. He said, for those waiting patiently, the grand return is close at hand, and we will not slow down. We are really just getting started.
We are really just getting started is the key phrase. It points directly to the future, specifically to Mars and the broader solar system. But to get there, they have to solve the first goal, the lunar economy.
Let's focus on that first goal, because when I hear lunar economy, my mind immediately defaults to sci-fi tropes.
Like what?
Space billboards, incredibly expensive lunar tourism, maybe mining some rare isotopes. But what does a lunar economy actually look like in practice over the next decade?
It looks like heavy industry. The immediate lunar economy isn't about tourism. It is about in situ resource utilization, or ISRU.
Using what's already there.
Exactly. It is about extracting that water ice from the shadowed craters at the South Pole. Once you have water H2O and you have that localized power grid generating continuous solar electricity, you can use electrolysis to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Okay, basic chemistry.
If you liquefy those gases, you have liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. That is hydrolox. That is premium rocket fuel.
So the goal isn't just to survive on the moon. It's to manufacture fuel on the moon.
Precisely. If you can manufacture fuel on the moon becomes a massive gas station for the rest of the solar system.
Oh, wow.
To understand why this is an economic game changer, you have to look at the tyranny of the rocket equation. Launching anything from Earth requires escaping a massive gravity well and pushing through a thick atmosphere.
It takes a lot of effort.
The vast majority of a rocket's mass when it sits on a launch pad in Florida is just the fuel required to lift its own weight into low Earth orbit.
Right. It takes a building-sized rocket just to put a car-sized payload into space.
But the moon's gravity is only 1/6 of Earth's, and it has no atmosphere. Launching a massive payload from the lunar surface requires a tiny fraction of the energy.
Because you aren't fighting the air or the heavy gravity.
If you can launch a spacecraft from Earth empty or refuel it in orbit using propellant manufactured on the moon and launched out of the shallow lunar gravity well, the economics of deep space travel completely flip.
It makes everything cheaper.
You can send massive payloads to Mars, to the asteroid belt, or to the outer planets for a fraction of the cost. The moon isn't just a destination, it's a strategic logistical hub.
Okay, so the moon becomes an industrial port city.
Yeah.
But regarding that third goal, laying the foundation for Mars, does that mean the moon is just a pit stop?
Not exactly.
Is it just a training ground? Or is it the main attraction for the rest of this century? Because building a 100-square-mile base seems like a lot of effort for a practice run.
It has to be both. It is an economic engine in its own right, driving technological advancements and generating wealth through that commercial ecosystem. But simultaneously, it serves as the most unforgiving, high-stakes simulation possible for Mars.
To make sure we don't fail when we go further.
Think about everything we just discussed. The life support systems, the power grids surviving thermal extremes, the radiation shielding using local regolith, the integration of autonomous commercial fleets.
All of that applies directly to Mars.
Exactly. The systems being tested in the 2030s on the moon are the exact architectures needed to survive on Mars. You cannot test a life support system designed for a 3-year Mars mission in a sterile lab on Earth.
Right.
Or even on the International Space Station, where you can get an emergency resupply in a few hours. You have to test it in the brutal, abrasive reality of a deep space environment.
And the margin for error on Mars is essentially zero compared to the moon.
That is the crux of it. If a transformer blows out on the lunar power grid or a habitat seal begins to leak, it is an emergency, but you are only a 3 to 5 day journey from Earth.
You can call for a tow truck, essentially.
You have near real-time communication with mission control, but if a power grid fails on Mars, you are millions of miles away. The communication delay can be up to 20 minutes each way.
You say help, and 40 minutes later you hear what's wrong.
Exactly. There is no immediate rescue, no rapid resupply. The systems have to be autonomous, redundant, and flawlessly reliable. The moon base is the proving ground where humanity learns how to survive long-term off-world, where we shake out the bugs in the hardware and the psychology before we dare take the leap to another planet.
That makes total sense.
In many ways, the moon is the harder environment. Mars has a thin atmosphere and a day-night cycle of about 24.5 hours.
Pretty similar to Earth.
But the moon has no atmosphere and a night that lasts 14 Earth days. If your power and thermal systems can survive a lunar night, they can definitely survive Mars.
Let's take a breath and recap the sheer scale of the reality we've just mapped out, because it is moving faster than most people realize.
It's moving at light speed.
We started with the immediate present, that record-breaking Artemis II fly-around that just happened in April 2026, pushing humanity deeper into the gravity well than ever before. We looked at the rapid-fire timeline moving toward orbital docking rehearsals in 2027.
Threading the needle on a roller coaster.
Exactly, and an actual crewed landing in 2028. We broke down the massive, decentralized commercial fleet making it happen, the Blue Origin cargo haulers, the Astrolab surface buggies, the towering SpaceX crew modules, all acting as the vanguard moving trucks, utilizing incredibly complex ballistic orbital routing.
Surfing the gravity wells.
We envisioned the 2030s, the brutal physical reality of constructing power grids, battling abrasive, electrostatically charged lunar dust, and burying specialized habitats under regolith to protect astronauts from cosmic radiation.
So a lot to take in.
And then we looked at the Moonfall drones sitting at the corners of a hundreds of square mile perimeter, quietly enforcing massive safety zones to protect against rocket ejecta and in doing so, redefining the geopolitics of outer space under the banner of respectful reciprocity.
Creating de facto borders.
All of it driving toward a heavy industry lunar economy, manufacturing hydrolox fuel to conquer the tyranny of the rocket equation and make the ultimate leap to Mars.
It is a phenomenal acceleration of human capability. We are watching the foundation of a multiplanetary infrastructure being laid in real time. The contracts are signed, the metal is being cut, the physics have been calculated, and the hardware is flying.
Which brings me back to what I asked you to do at the very beginning of our conversation. Tonight, when you step outside and look up at the moon, I want you to remember everything we've talked about today.
It's not just a rock anymore.
The hardware that will permanently mark humanity's first off-world borders has already been built. The funds have been cleared. The timeline is locked in. The shift from visiting the moon to residing on the moon is happening right now, above your head.
It's a brand new era.
But as you look at that silver disk, I want to leave you with one lingering question to chew on. As we build these sprawling bases, lay down complex power grids in the regolith, and set up our digital boundary markers with autonomous drones to protect our multi-billion-dollar investments, are we truly ready for the philosophical and moral complexities of becoming a multi-planetary species? Or, in our rush to claim the resources of the South Pole, are we simply exporting our earthly borders, our industrial friction, and our geopolitical conflicts straight to the stars?